Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And may the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be upon you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you wake up in a courtroom.
Okay.
Only, this isn't your standard trial. Every single safety net that you've spent your entire life building has just been, well, completely stripped away.
Right, like totally gone.
Exactly. Your bank accounts, your diversified portfolios, the equity in your house, it's all entirely dissolved.
All of it.
Yeah, and that massive network of friends, your colleagues, the influencers you spent decades cultivating. Nowhere to be found.
It's just terrifying, honestly.
It really is. Even your own parents, right? The
Yes.
people whose actual DNA you share, they look right through you because they are just entirely consumed by their own terror.
Yeah, the tradition is very clear on that.
Right. And this is the Day of Judgment, as described in the Islamic tradition. It's essentially the ultimate manifestation of this fear that lives, deep in the human psyche, which is total existential isolation.
It's a genuinely terrifying premise because it removes all those illusions we use to comfort ourselves every single day. We kind of insulate ourselves with wealth and status, and we convince ourselves that these things provide permanence,
We really do.
But on that specific day, you are standing before the creator of the universe, and the currency of the material world you left behind has an exchange rate of exactly 0.
Wow. 0.
Right. You are left entirely alone with just the weight of your own actions.
But, that isolation is exactly why we're plunging into this specific material today, because right in the middle of that absolute desolation, the tradition introduces this massive paradigm shift.
Right, the exception.
Exactly. There is one companion, one entity that is guaranteed to break through that isolation, stand directly by your side, and actively argue your case when literally everyone else has abandoned you.
Such a powerful image.
It is, and that companion is a book, specifically the Quran. But the caveat, and a pretty massive caveat, right?
Oh, definitely.
The caveat is that it only acts as this cosmic intercessor, provided you maintained a real living relationship with it in this world.
Which is just a brilliant reframing of how we interact with Scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the idea is that the words you recite and internalize today, they don't just, stay ink on a page.
Yeah.
They actually take on a form to defend you later.
That's wild to think about.
It really transforms the text from just this static historical document into a dynamic living advocate.
So if you're listening to this right now, maybe you're commuting, maybe you're just doing chores around the house, you probably have, I don't know, a dozen different anxieties running in the background of your mind.
As we all do.
Right. And we aren't going to give you just another generic, morning routine hack to fix that.
No, we're going way deeper than that.
Exactly. We need to look at the mechanics of why your brain feels so loud in the first place and how this specific text functions as a literal structural remedy. So in this deep dive, we're going to trace the sequential life lessons from specific verses. We're looking at the exact mechanisms of how the Quran operates as a physical and spiritual medicine, the economic model of its rewards, and how to actually secure that ultimate intercession.
It's a huge journey.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we even look at the theology, I want to ground this in hard, modern clinical data.
I love starting here.
Right.
Right.
Because the physical impact of reading sacred texts is something neuroscience has actually been actively measuring. There's this 2009 study by neuroscientists Andrew Newberg and Mark Robert Waldman. It's detailed in their research on how focused contemplation literally physically alters the brain's structure.
What's fascinating here is the actual mechanics of that study. They're incredibly revealing.
Tell me about it.
So Newberg and Waldman utilized functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI scans to look at the brains of individuals engaged in deep, meaningful prayer and the recitation of sacred texts.
While they were actually doing it.
Exactly, in real time.
Yeah.
They weren't just asking about emotional responses. They were mapping biological neuroplasticity.
Wow.
And they found that this kind of sustained engagement actively decreases activity in the amygdala.
The amygdala being the brain's primary fear and stress center, right?
Right.
The part that's constantly scanning for threats and just pumping out cortisol.
Precisely. It is the primitive alarm system. So when you're doom scrolling or dealing with modern societal pressures, the amygdala is often just hyperactive.
Oh, totally. Mine definitely is.
But deep engagement with a text that the person perceives as absolute truth, It literally turns the volume down on that alarm.
That's incredible.
And simultaneously, the fMRI scans showed increased blood flow and activity in the anterior cingulate cortex and the frontal lobes.
Okay, and what do those areas do?
Those are the areas responsible for regulating empathy, complex rational thought, and emotional equilibrium. So by regularly reciting and contemplating the text, you are physically building thicker neural pathways in the regions of the brain that govern peace, focus, and purpose.
So let me get this straight. The clinical data is essentially arguing that reading this material deeply rewires your biology to be more resilient to anxiety.
That's what the beta shows, yeah.
But what modern neuroscience frames as this, groundbreaking 21st century discovery about neuroplasticity, the Quran literally laid out as a comprehensive physiological and spiritual baseline 1,400 years ago.
Exactly. The clinical data is simply observing the footprint of the ancient spiritual prescription.
Right.
The brain changes because the mind is processing something it recognizes as ultimate stabilizing truth.
Which, brings up the most obvious question, right? Why this specific book?
Good question.
Because there's a lot of literature out there. You could read Marcus Aurelius or, modern philosophy and probably get some degree of focus.
Sure, you'd get some calming effect.
Yeah. So what gives the Quran this unparalleled transformative effect on the human condition?
Well, to understand that, we really have to examine the text's own claim about its origin.
Okay.
Because the biological reaction is a direct response to the nature of the words being processed. Let's look at Surah Al-Waqi'ah.
Ah, okay.
Specifically verses 77 through 79.
Let's do it.
The text declares, "Indeed, it is a noble Quran, in a register well protected. None touch it except the purified. A revelation from the Lord of the worlds."
The vocabulary the classical scholars unpacked here is just fascinating. In verse 77, the text describes itself as Kareem.
Yes.
And in English, we usually translate that as noble or honored. But I don't know, that feels a bit passive to me.
How so?
Like an old king sitting on a throne who doesn't really do much, but just demands respect.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Huh.
And that passive translation really doesn't capture the linguistic weight of the word.
Right.
If we look at the monumental commentary by Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, he really dissects the root of Kareem.
What does he say?
In the Arabic linguistic tradition, Kareem implies something that yields immense, overflowing, and continuous good.
Oh, wow. Overflowing.
Yes, it is a generative honor. Al-Razi points out that the Quran is not merely honored in and of itself, it actively bestows honor and nobility upon whoever engages with it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's a transformative agent.
It's almost like it's radioactive, but in a totally positive way. You can't get near it without its properties bleeding into you.
That's a great way to put it.
And then verse 78 states it is in a register well protected, or what the tradition calls the Law al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet.
Right, and this is where we leave the physical realm completely.
Okay, take me there.
Renowned exegetes like Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari extensively detail this concept. The assertion here is that before the Quran was ever articulated by the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in 7th century Arabia, it existed in a protected cosmic reality.
So it's not a human invention.
Exactly. It is not the byproduct of human historical development or, cultural evolution. It is a direct transmission from outside the bounds of the physical universe, guarded by angels.
Wow.
Which instantly elevates the stakes of what you are holding in your hands.
It really does. But that elevation, it comes with a pretty strict barrier to entry, right?
It does.
Verse 79 says, "None touch it except the purified." And I kind of want to push back on this a bit, or at least explore the mechanics of it.
Let's do it.
Because the majority of historical Islamic jurisprudence interprets purified to mean literal, physical cleanliness, right?
Yes, performing wudu.
Exactly. The ritual ablution of washing the face, the arms, the feet before picking up the physical book, the mushaf.
Correct.
But if this is a cosmic document that physically rewires the brain, isn't focusing on washing your hands a bit, I don't know, superficial.
That's a very modern reaction to it.
Right, because why would the creator of the universe care about the physical dust on my fingers when I'm trying to access divine truth?
That tension you're pointing out is exactly what fueled centuries of profound scholarly debate.
Oh, really? It's not just me.
Not at all. If you consult the Tafsir works of Al-Qurtubi and Al-Jalain, they address this dual reality really comprehensively.
Okay.
On a literal legal level, yes, the 4 major schools of thought derive that physical purity is required to touch the bound pages.
Right.
But it is not superficial. It's an external psychological primer for an internal reality.
A psychological primer. I like that.
The physical washing forces a cognitive break from the mundane world. It signals to your brain, I am leaving the ordinary and preparing to handle the extraordinary.
Okay, I see that. It's almost like an advanced protocol for handling something highly volatile or valuable.
Exactly.
Like if you're a scientist handling a rare extraterrestrial mineral in a lab, you don't just stroll in drinking a coffee.
No, of course not.
You go through a decontamination chamber. You put on a specialized hazmat suit. The protocol forces you to respect the material's nature.
That is a perfect secular analogy for the physical aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But scholars like Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya take this much deeper.
Oh, where does he take it?
Into the metaphorical and spiritual realm. Ibn Qayyim argues that if physical purity is the prerequisite to touch the paper, then spiritual purity is the absolute prerequisite to touch the meaning.
Wait, so you can physically hold the book, read the Arabic perfectly, and still completely fail to touch the actual Quran?
Exactly.
Wow.
Because the text is well protected, remember?
Yeah, right.
It protects its deepest wisdom from those who approach it with polluted intentions.
What kind of polluted intention?
If a person's heart is clouded with arrogance, cynicism, or just an obsession with worldly dominance, those psychological diseases act as a barrier. The words will literally bounce right off them.
That is so profound.
Ibn Qayyim emphasized that a corrupted heart simply cannot interface with a pure, divine frequency. You have to cleanse the internal receiver to pick up the transmission.
Which, honestly, poses an incredibly direct challenge to anyone listening to this right now.
It really does.
Think about where the Quran physically sits in your living space right now. Is it, like, relegated to the highest bookshelf, gathering literal dust?
Right, just serving as a cultural relic.
Yeah, or a decorative symbol of identity. Because if we accept the premise that this is a radioactive, generative document from a cosmic registry, ignoring it isn't just a lack of piety.
No, it's not.
It is a staggering failure of resource management.
Resource management, that's a great way to put it. And that concept transitions us perfectly into the mechanics of action.
Let's go there.
Because if engaging with this text requires the discipline of physical and spiritual purification, human nature naturally asks, what is the return on that investment?
Exactly. What is the practical yield of all this effort? Let's look at the economics of this.
Right.
Surah Fatir, verses 29 and 30, they use language that sounds like it was pulled straight from a Wall Street prospectus.
It really does.
It reads, "Indeed, those who recite the Book of Allah and establish prayer and spend out of what we have provided them, secretly and openly, hope for a transaction that will never perish, that he may give them in full their rewards and increase for them of his bounty. Indeed, he is forgiving and appreciative."
The pivotal Arabic term anchoring these verses is tijara.
Tija.
Yes, which literally translates to business, commerce, or trade.
That's so interesting.
It's fascinating that the divine chooses the language of economics to explain a spiritual relationship.
Why do you think that is?
Because commerce is a universal human language. We all inherently understand the concepts of capital, risk, investment, and, frankly, the deep-seated fear of loss.
Right. When you invest in the real world, the baseline assumption is risk.
Oh,
You can hire the best portfolio managers, diversify across global markets, but an unforeseen geopolitical event can wipe out 30% of your net worth overnight.
happens all the time.
But here, the language is absolute, a transaction that will never perish. Let me evolve the standard spiritual stock market metaphor for a second.
Go for it.
This isn't just a safe index fund. This operates like a venture capital fund, where the founder of the fund personally underwrites 100% of your losses.
Yes.
He guarantees you won't lose a single cent of your principal, but then lets you keep an exponential, limitless share of the equity upside.
It completely defies all earthly economic logic.
It really does.
And to participate in this fund, the text outlines a very specific three-pronged investment portfolio.
Okay, let's break down the portfolio.
First, recite the Book of Allah. This is the internal, intellectual, and spiritual consumption. It's data acquisition.
Step 1.
Second, establish prayer. This takes the data and turns it into a direct, communicative relationship with the divine. It's the operational upkeep.
And then the third piece grounds it in society. Spend out of what we have provided them, secretly and openly.
Yes. This is crucial because it shatters the idea that deep spiritual engagement requires, like, monastic isolation.
Right, you're not just meditating on a mountain.
Exactly. You aren't meant to sit in a cave reciting scripture all day. The internal nourishment of the Quran and prayer must manifest as external, social responsibility.
That makes so much sense.
You take the resources you've been given, wealth, time, knowledge, and you distribute them
Openly and secretly.
openly to set an example and build community, and secretly to train your own ego to act without the reward of human applause.
It's a perfectly balanced, holistic lifestyle.
It truly is.
But the payout structure described in verse 30 is where the linguistics get really profound to me.
Okay, let's look at it.
It says, Allah will give them in full their rewards and increase for them of his bounty, and then ends by describing Allah as forgiving and appreciative, Ghafur and Shakur.
Yes, those two names.
Why would a verse entirely structured around a business contract end with the concepts of forgiveness and appreciation? I mean, in corporate culture, if I sign a contract and fail to deliver, my boss doesn't forgive me.
No, they fire you.
Exactly, they fire me.
This is where we must look at the morphology of the Arabic words. Contemporary analytical scholars and thinkers, such as Numan Ali Khan and Omar Suleiman, have spent considerable time breaking down these specific names of Allah.
Oh, I've heard some of their lectures. They're great.
They are. And they point out that the words are not just simple adjectives. They are in the intensive hyperbolic grammatical form.
Okay, explain that. Let's start with Ghafur.
Right, Ghafur. So, in any human endeavor, our execution is flawed. Even when you try to fulfill the three-part portfolio we just talked about, you will mess up.
Oh, constantly.
Your mind will wander during prayer. Your recitation will be clumsy. Your charity might be slightly tainted by a fleeting desire for recognition.
Yeah, we're human.
Exactly. A strict human auditor would dock your pay or void the contract entirely. But the divine partner in this tijara is Ghafur, intensely, continuously forgiving.
Continuous.
He anticipates the flaws in the execution and writes the forgiveness into the contract from day one, provided the intention remains sincere.
Wow. That immediately removes the paralysis of perfectionism.
He does.
You don't have to be a flawless scholar to start investing. You just have to enter the market.
Just get in the market.
But what about Shakur?
So the root letters shekar generally mean gratitude or appreciation.
Right.
But shakur, in its intensive form, represents a mechanism of extreme divine leverage.
Leverage? How so?
It implies an entity who takes a tiny, almost insignificant deed and rewards it with a disproportionately massive, unimaginable payout.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about an employee who struggles immensely to learn a new software system. They're slow, they make mistakes, but they're staying late every single night trying to master it.
Right.
A normal boss might tolerate them. A shakur boss would see the invisible internal struggle, the sheer friction of the effort, and promote them above the naturally gifted employees simply because of their grit.
That fundamentally changes the psychological approach to reading the Quran. Because if you struggle to read the Arabic, if you're stumbling over the phonetic pronunciation, the divine isn't judging your lack of fluency.
Not at all.
He is shakur. He is actively magnifying the reward precisely because it is difficult for you. The friction itself becomes the currency.
Yes. The friction is the currency. That's a brilliant insight.
So if you are listening to this, I really want you to audit your daily investments.
A self-audit.
Yeah. Where is your psychological capital actually going? Are you pouring 2 hours a day into doom scrolling, consuming content that actively spikes your amygdala and promises absolutely zero long-term return?
Most of us are, unfortunately.
Right. Or could you divert just 20 minutes of that capital into a trade managed by a partner who underwrites your mistakes and exponentially multiplies your clumsiest efforts?
It really is the most rational reallocation of time a human being can make.
It just makes logical sense.
But, we must address a critical reality here. A successful business transaction brings wealth, and spiritual investment brings spiritual reward. But accumulating assets, even spiritual ones, doesn't automatically resolve deep, acute psychological pain in the present moment.
Yeah, that is very true.
You can have a thriving tijara and still be grappling with internal darkness.
Which moves us perfectly into the functional application of this text in the trenches of our daily lives.
Yes.
How does the Quran operate when we are actively suffering? Let's look at Surah Al-Isra.
Great surah to look at for this.
Verse 9 establishes a baseline. It says, "Indeed, this Quran guides to that which is most suitable and gives good tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds that they will have a great reward."
Right.
But then verse 82 introduces a completely different mechanism. It says, "And we send down of the Quran that which is healing and mercy for believers, but it does not increase the wrongdoers except in loss."
We see a really clear dual functionality here. Verse 9 is the architectural blueprint, the GPS.
GPS, okay.
Sayyid Qutb, in his monumental exegesis, in the shade of the Quran, notes that the phrase guides to that which is most suitable or the most upright path is not limited to individual piety.
Oh, it's broader.
Much broader. It is a comprehensive framework for establishing the most balanced psychological, social, economic, and political systems. It's the straightest trajectory for human flourishing on a macro level.
Got it.
But verse 82 zooms into the micro level, introducing the concept of Shifa, literal healing, medicine.
Wait, let me push back on the spiritual pharmacy idea for a second, because
Sure.
this is where modern listeners often feel a massive disconnect.
I can see why.
If someone is dealing with clinical depression, crushing loneliness, or profound trauma, simply telling them to go read a 1,400-year-old book can sound dismissive, frankly.
It can sound very dismissive.
It can sound like toxic positivity. So how did classical scholars differentiate between a standard psychological or physiological condition that requires medical intervention and these specific issues that the Quran claims to provide Shifa for?
That is a vital distinction, and I'm glad you brought it up. The classical scholars were actually highly attuned to it.
They were.
Yes. We must look at the psychological framework developed by scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah, which was then expanded upon by his student Ibn Qayyim.
Okay, what did they say?
They did not conflate physical brain diseases with spiritual diseases.
Hmm.
If you have a neurochemical imbalance, you seek medical treatment. That is highly encouraged in the Islamic tradition.
Good. That's an important caveat.
But Ibn Taymiyyah categorized the diseases of the heart, the ailments that destroy the soul from the inside out, into two specific domains, the diseases of shubuhat and the diseases of shahawat.
Okay, let's break those down. What are shubuhat?
Shubuhat are cognitive diseases, doubts, ideological crises, intellectual confusion, existential despair.
Like a crisis of meaning.
Exactly. It's the sickness of not knowing your purpose or doubting the existence of justice in the world.
And how does the Quran cure that?
The Quran acts as Shifa for this by relentlessly providing intellectual clarity and cosmological context.
Give me an example.
Okay, if you are suffering from the disease of arrogance, believing you are the center of the universe, the text acts as a surgical intervention.
A surgical intervention.
It constantly reminds you of your biological origin from dust and the vast, terrifying scale of the cosmos. It instantly right-sizes your ego.
Wow, okay. And what about shahawat?
Shahawat are emotional diseases. Base desires, unchecked greed, lust, crippling envy, the insatiable need for validation.
Oh, so basically the entire modern social media experience.
Pretty much, yeah. If you are consumed by the disease of envy, constantly comparing your life to the curated lives of others online, the Quran provides Shifa by recalibrating your definition of success.
Right.
It shows the transient nature of worldly wealth and promises ultimate eternal justice.
But what about the epidemic of loneliness? Like the sheer isolation of modern life? How does reading a text cure the feeling that no one truly knows you or cares about you?
By altering the very nature of your internal monologue.
How so?
When you read the Quran, you are not reading a historical narrative about a distant deity. You are engaging in an active, unmediated dialogue.
Ah.
The structure of the text constantly addresses the reader directly. It acknowledges human frailty. Going back to that Newberg fMRI study from the beginning,
Neuroplasticity.
when the brain processes this text, it registers that it is being spoken to by the absolute. The chaotic, isolating noise of the world is replaced by the stabilizing, intimate voice of the Creator.
That's incredibly powerful.
It is the ultimate antidote to isolation because it proves you are observed, known, and guided.
You know, that makes the medical analogy incredibly precise.
How do you mean?
Like if you go to a specialist for a life-threatening infection, the doctor writes a prescription for a highly specific, potent antibiotic.
Right.
The medicine is the literal Shifa. You fill the prescription. The bottle is sitting right there on your nightstand. But if you refuse to unscrew the cap,
If you don't take it.
right, if you refuse to adjust the dosage, your infection will spread and eventually kill you. The cure was physically present in your room, but it was functionally useless because of your own neglect.
And that precise analogy explains the seemingly paradoxical, almost chilling conclusion of verse 82.
The part about the wrongdoers.
Yes, it states that the Quran is a healing and mercy for believers, but it does not increase the wrongdoers except in loss.
Yeah, that always confused me. If it's a universal cure, how could it possibly cause harm? How does medicine increase someone in loss?
It's because of the psychological phenomenon of cognitive dissonance and the spiritual reality of rejecting truth.
Walk me through that.
Imagine a patient who is deeply arrogant, who refuses to admit they are sick. You place the undeniable cure right in front of them. The sheer act of looking at the cure forces them to confront their illness.
Right, they can't ignore it anymore.
If their pride forces them to reject the medicine, they haven't just stayed sick, they have actively committed a crime against their own soul. Classical giants like Al-Dahabi and Ibn Kathir argue that the loss here is the progressive hardening of the heart.
Scar tissue.
Exactly. Every single time you hear the truth, recognize it on a cellular level, but actively choose to push it away because it threatens your lifestyle or your ego, your heart develops a layer of scar tissue.
That is terrifying.
The medicine is pure, but the patient's immune system is so corrupted by arrogance that it launches a catastrophic allergic reaction against the cure itself.
That brings up a really uncomfortable reality. If the medicine is so effective, but the rejection of it is so fatal, what does the terminal stage of that sickness actually look like?
It's grim.
What happens to the human psyche when it successfully pushes the cure entirely out of his life?
We see the answer to this in the next section of our discussion, where we examine the stark paradox of the constricted life versus divine elevation.
Okay, let's look at it.
Let's look at the chilling diagnosis in Surah Taha, verse 124. And whoever turns away from my remembrance indeed, he will have a depressed life, and we will gather him on the day of resurrection blind.
A depressed life. Some translations say a constricted life, right?
Yes, the Arabic phrasing here is a masterclass in psychological diagnosis.
Yeah.
The term used for constricted life is maishatan dankan.
Maishatan Dankan.
Commentators like Syed Abul al-Maududi and Ibn Kathir go to great lengths to clarify that this constriction is not a reference to socioeconomic status.
Oh, it's not about being poor.
Not at all.
Mm.
You can be materially impoverished, but possess a heart that feels as expansive as the sky because it is anchored in the divine.
Okay, so what is it then?
Conversely, Maishatan Duncan describes a specific, suffocating internal reality that actually often plagues the elite.
You know, I always visualize Maishatan Dankan as the ultimate paradox of modern success.
How do you picture it?
Imagine a person who has achieved everything society tells us to strive for. They live in a sprawling, multi-million-dollar mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows.
Right, the dream.
They have fleets of luxury cars, massive influence, millions of followers. Externally, their life is incredibly expansive. But psychologically, internally, they feel like they are trapped inside a dark, airless, microscopic closet.
Yes.
They suffer from paranoia, they trust no one, their relationships are entirely transactional, and they are haunted by this hollow emptiness that no amount of consumption, no vacations, no purchases, no substance abuse can fill.
None of it works.
That internal claustrophobia, that is Maishatan Dankan.
It is the inevitable result of starving the soul.
Starving it.
The human soul is not terrestrial.
Yeah.
It cannot be sustained by terrestrial matter. When you deny the soul its natural nutrient, which is the remembrance of Allah, primarily manifested through the Quran, it begins to suffocate.
Wow.
Regardless of how much caviar you feed the physical body, it is a slow psychological asphyxiation.
That is a brutal image.
And the verse seamlessly connects this internal state to the terrifying physical reality of the hereafter. We'll gather him on the day of resurrection blind.
Which is pure poetic justice, right? They aren't arbitrarily punished with blindness. It's the physical manifestation of their earthly choice.
Exactly. The Quran consistently refers to itself and divine guidance as nur light.
Right light.
If a person spends their entire life squeezing their eyes shut against the light, actively pretending it doesn't exist so they can live in the dark without accountability.
God just actualizes that preference.
Precisely. The Creator simply actualizes that preference for eternity. You chose functional blindness in the realm of choices. It becomes your physical, inescapable reality in the realm of consequences.
That is profound.
It is a profound demonstration that God does not oppress. Humanity oppresses itself.
But, you know, the architecture of the Quran never leaves the reader entirely in the dark. It always juxtaposes the most terrifying warnings with the most breathtaking hope.
Always.
Let's contrast that suffocating, constricted life immediately with Surah Al-Mujadila, verse 11. Allah will raise those who have believed among you and those who were given knowledge by degrees.
This introduces the divine metric of status, which entirely upends human social hierarchies. Well, in every society, Humans desperately try to elevate their ranks. We do it through accumulating wealth, acquiring prestigious university degrees, wearing designer labels, or networking with the elite.
Right, the rat race.
But this verse establishes that the ultimate status elevator, the only one recognized by the architecture of reality, is knowledge. And in the context of the classical scholars, those who were given knowledge primarily refers to the internalized knowledge of the Quran.
Okay.
This elevation isn't just a promise for the hereafter. It fundamentally alters the social fabric of this world.
I know contemporary scholars like Abu Omar Yasser Qadi frequently highlight the historical application of this exact verse.
Yes, the early generations are the perfect example.
If you look at the early generations of Islamic history, you see individuals who were the most marginalized, discarded members of society, formerly enslaved people, individuals with zero tribal backing, the absolute poorest of the poor.
Exactly.
And they were elevated to become the most respected judges, leaders, and intellectual giants of their time.
Yes, their societal elevation was purely because they memorized, understood, and applied the Quran.
It's amazing.
The text acted as a hyper-elevator that completely bypassed the rigid, prejudiced social hierarchies of human design. It connected them directly to both divine approval and unassailable societal respect.
The Quran literally rewrote their earthly destiny.
It did.
So we turn this directly back to you, listening right now. If you are honest with yourself in the quiet, unguarded moments of the night, what is the internal texture of your life?
A very important question to ask.
Does your existence feel expansive, purposeful, and resilient? Or does it feel inexplicably constricted, burdened by an anxiety you can't quite articulate?
That Maya Shatan Duncan.
Exactly. If you are experiencing that internal claustrophobia, the answer isn't going to be found in another self-help podcast or a biohacking supplement.
No, it won't.
The solution to modern spiritual asphyxiation is simply returning to the text. It's unscrewing the cap on the medicine. It is letting the light back into the room.
Which really brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've explored today.
Let's bring it all together.
We have examined the clinical neuroscience of how the text alters the brain. We have unpacked the absolute necessity of approaching this cosmic document with physical and spiritual purity.
Right.
We analyzed the foolproof economic model of divine commerce, the surgical precision of its healing, the psychological terror of abandoning it, and the societal elevation of adhering to it.
All of which builds to the singular climax we teased at the very beginning of this deep dive. Let's return to that terrifying opening scenario, the absolute isolation of the Day of Judgment.
Right, the courtroom.
We have traversed all these earthly mechanisms to understand the final cosmic payoff, explicitly guaranteed in the authentic traditions. Specifically, in Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 804.
A very famous hadith.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, delivered a command that bridges the temporary world with the eternal one. He said, "Read the Quran, for it will come as an intercessor for its reciters on the day of resurrection."
This is where the abstract becomes unimaginably concrete.
Tell me about it.
The text that you held in your hands, the verses that you struggled to pronounce correctly, the commands that you allowed to act as a scalpel on your ego, the late nights you spent trying to comprehend its depths, all of that energy does not dissipate.
It doesn't just vanish.
No. In the physics of the hereafter, concepts and actions take on tangible form. The Quran will personify.
It literally steps into the courtroom as your defense attorney.
It does. If you stood by the Quran in this world, defending its principles in a society that mocked them, applying its guidance when it was inconvenient, letting it be your compass and your cure, it will take on a life of its own.
Wow.
It will stand by you when every other relationship on earth has shattered. It will stand before the Creator and actively argue on your behalf.
That gives me chills.
The tradition tells us it will say, "O Lord, I kept him awake at night. I stopped him from his desires during the day, so accept my intercession for him." And we are told that its intercession is never rejected.
It is the ultimate, unbreakable companionship.
Truly the ultimate companion.
We want to leave you with one final, provocative reality to mull over as you transition back into the noise of your day. We spend an incalculable amount of time, hours, weeks, entire decades, exhausting ourselves building networks and connections in this world.
We really do.
We network with bosses, with venture capitalists, with social media influencers, with people we desperately hope will give us a leg up. People who, if we are entirely honest with ourselves, might not even remember our names when the next news cycle hits.
It's a harsh truth.
So what if you took just a fraction of that exhausting, anxious energy and spent it networking with the one book that guarantees to know your name, stand by your side, and aggressively defend you on the hardest, most isolating day of your entire existence?
Something to really think about.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you with goodness for spending your valuable time listening to us.